what is clear to me is that the basic human rights of New York City's public school students and parents are being violated daily, and that this has been antagonized by mayoral control. By failing to provide a quality education that develops our children to their fullest potential, we're violating their basic human rights. By displaying antagonism towards parents under mayoral control, as we've heard, and by discouraging parent involvement in the education of their students, of their children, we're violating basic human rights. I mean, we all know that the experts, any expert in fashioning a solution to a problem are the people who are most directly affected by that problem. In this case, we're trying to fix the public education system, so it's really a mystery to me why the mayor would be discouraging parents from participating and finding solutions to our public education problem, our demise. Let's see. By finding tactics to push students out of school, we're violating their basic human rights. By failing to provide ideal classroom sizes, provide services for students with special needs, providing culturally relevant curricula, having teachers who actually represent the demographics of the students that they teach. All these are violations of human rights. Very disturbingly, by turning the public education system into a profit-making enterprise, including through the charter schools, are violating our human rights. And the fact that all these policies and everything we've heard here today really is disproportionately affecting brown and black kids in New York City, poor children in New York City, anyone who is vulnerable to discrimination in New York City. It's disproportionately affecting those students. And under human rights law, it doesn't matter what the intent of discrimination is. It's the fact that there's a disproportionate effect on children of color means that it's discriminatory. And the city and the state should be held accountable. We're behind the rest of the world. We're certainly behind the industrialized world in education. And I know that often people think that this only affects children that people in power don't care about. Well, I have news for them, because actually the future of children of color in this country will affect the future of America. So it doesn't really matter if people think that our children are important or not. At the end of the day, it will affect everybody, including those people in power today. One of the problems that I think we have is that the people who are in power, decision-making positions do not have their children in the public education system. So if they had their children in the public education system, we would find solutions to the problem yesterday. So I'll say in closing that really, I'll state the obvious, that we need to hold the city and the state accountable. We need to do it here, but we can also do it on the global stage. The U.S. is going to be coming up for review on its compliance with a human rights treaty on eliminating racial discrimination. It's supposed to come up for review next year. What we can do is compile this information and submit it as testimony so that the rest of the world, the global community, can also help in judging and holding the U.S. accountable to these violations. So with that, again, I'll say thank you and keep up the good work.
I want to join in the observations that Ejim just made, and also as a member of an organization that is in consultative status with the United Nations, that will be part of that motion, because that's the work we've been doing over the last 20 years, is raising the issue of U.S. violation of human rights. So I certainly want to join in that. I think the testimony today has demonstrated what is obvious to the people who are here, that it is a system that is in crisis, it's a system that is devastated, and that the victims are our children. And that means that the victims are our future. I think people have laid out what the different elements are. We've identified some of those causes. Certainly the question of mayoral control, which is an anti-democratic concept from Jump Street is key to that. So that in terms of one of the things that we have to do is that we have to make sure that mayoral control is repealed. And there was testimony, and I think Assemblywoman Barron said she's going to introduce legislation for that. You know, we've had circulating a petition that we want to, you know, go all over the city and upstate so that the legislature knows that on the ground, grassroots level, people are dissatisfied with mayoral control. And I think the point that Ejim raised also around understanding that what we need is an education for liberation. And when people talked about the history of coming out of Ocean Hill, Brownsville, that struggle was an education for liberation. That was a struggle for the education, for the development of our children, of what Ferry would say, an education of thinking, of learning how to think and analyze. And if our children are critical and learn how to think and analyze, then they're going to struggle for liberation. What we're facing now in terms of the people who run the system is an education for incarceration. So when that teacher made the comment, I don't know if she was making a judgment but that might have just been a real clear observation. I'm educating future felons because I understand that's what they're being prepared for. And so that's all tied to the profit motive. You know, when people say, why was Kathy Black chosen? Since she had no background in education, and you know, I was one of the lawyers that filed lawsuits against it. She had no background in education. She never had any, and her children never went to a public school. But when we filed our papers, one of the key points we made was that whole question of wireless generation and Murdoch, and how Klein had gone over to Murdoch as an educational consultant, and Murdoch had bought wireless generation, and that they were now involved in getting a no-bid contract for 23, you know, for whatever amount of money it was. But Kathy Black was put in place to shepherd the budget, the $23 billion budget. So when we understand that's the motive underlying that motivates those who control the situation now, our children being geared and directed towards incarceration makes perfect sense, because under the 13th Amendment, slavery is still legal when you're incarcerated. So that when people are working in those prisons, they're working for major corporations. And so I think with understanding all of that, the real issue always becomes, what do we do with it? And it's got to be a mobilization that people have got to become active in all the different spheres. We got to move. We've got to make our elected officials accountable. I know there was a real hot debate earlier this week with Walcott around the closing of the schools. But the point that was made, and I think the only person who could really make it, even though Walcott said it, was, you know what, you all approved the budget that allows us to do that. Yeah. And Charles was the only one who had voted against it. And the other ones, it was fire and theater and propaganda, because at that point they're covering their assets. But they voted that budget. And so we've got to make them accountable. We do not hold them accountable. Democracy has got to be a 24/7 exercise, not something that's exercised every 2 years when people go and vote, because that's not holding them accountable. So to the extent that these hearings and the material that gets pulled together can educate and mobilize people and motivate them to be out in the streets, because it's the Ocean Hill-Brownsville struggle that will create the type of democracy and the type of board of education that we need. And I think in that extent, we'll move forward and win. Thank you.
Thank you very much. For me, it's been a great pleasure to be here, be part of this wonderful experience. There's two things. One is learning about, and the other is learning from. And this particular experience, sitting here listening to the testimonies, is learning from. And for me, it's an experience that really transformed my life. I think if I had to look for keywords to describe what happened here today, one is that these testimonies in some way become the voice of the voiceless. Those children that are becoming the victims of this institution that we call Department of Education. I think also we need to pay a lot of attention to how we can put together information that help people to understand how is that after the civil rights movement, yes, you don't see the signs anymore, and it's illegal to see the sign that blacks are not allowed, Latinos are not allowed. That's illegal, but that do not mean that we are allowed to be part of that. So there are invisible signs, and this is what we call the institutionalization of racism, the institutionalization of sexism, the institutionalization of classism, that you have some evil people that they can calculate how well they can do things just to destroy others people's life. I think also it's very important to have a clear understanding that because we're building people's hope with this type of experience. And in this capitalist society, they've been hitting us very strong with these wrong values that the only way that you have power is if you have money. So money is power. And that's bullshit, okay? They know that knowledge is power. And because they know that knowledge is power, they need to find a way how to keep knowledge away. They also know that organized people is power, which is more or less the invitation that we present in here. So, yes, we get frustrated because people don't go out. But first you need to educate people, and then you need to organize people, and then you call people to get out. But I want to close by emphasizing something else that I think is also very important, as coming from the academia, but also as a priest, that I believe that there is something that we call a spiritual crisis going on in all this way of that the mayor make a decision how to organize the distribution of the money that belongs to us, the people. And it's this concept that we call religious neoliberalism. Well, they've been hitting people very strong, especially in the black and in the Latino community, that what happened to us is because God wants us to go through that bullshit. Okay? So we are suffering because God is testing us, or because we are in sin. And this is a very strong value that we need to find a way how to start destroying this, because bring a lot of benefit to these people in power. So, especially in the black and in the Latino community, that what happened to us is because God wants us to go through that bullshit. Okay? So we are suffering because God is testing us, or because we are in sin. And this is a very strong value that we need to find a way how to start destroying this, because bring a lot of benefit to these people in power. So I believe, as a priest, that God is not responsible for this crisis. So that means that I'm not going to pray to God to fix this shit. Okay? I'm becoming disrespectful if I pray to God. We need to take responsibility to fix this thing so we can change things the way we want. It's time to talk about classism, racism, ethnocentrism, but more important, what's going on here with this education is colonialism. And when our children internalize the values of the oppressor, they don't need someone there to check. By the way, they can become our enemies, because we are the ones that are wrong. So then we need to go back to basic steps, Paulo Freire, concientización, okay? Which is possible. And I don't want you to get out of here depressed, feeling bad, without hope. We're getting out of here with a lot of hope. We're gonna change this shit. Amen.